Hey Invincible Ones, Samantha Cooper here, coming to you live and very cold from Astoria, Queens, New York City. I am the playwright of this play, and I just wanted to take some time and make you this video so that I could introduce myself, so I could talk a little bit about the play and my inspirations, and then to talk pretty quickly about what a new play process has been like in my experience, because I'm assuming a lot of you haven't been able to work with the playwright in this capacity yet, which I think is very exciting. So let's just get started. We'll start with the history of me. I'm going to go all the way back to birth, but I promise to try and be quick. My trajectory on the map looks a little bit like this. It goes Great Falls, Montana, Spokane, Washington, Cheney, Washington, Bellingham, Washington, Seattle, Washington, and then to New York City. Growing up in Eastern Washington, I pretty much did everything that you could imagine, from tap dance and ballet to basketball and soccer, and most of those things I was not coordinated enough for. And then through it all, I did theater. Throughout high school, and then actually into college as well, I did a lot of acting, and that was my main focus for a very long time. Graduated from high school in 2005, and from there, I went right to Western. Woohoo! And I was at Western for 5 years, actually. I double majored in theater, and I did acting and playwriting. And then I also had a major in English literature. I did a lot of things on campus. I was pretty involved throughout my whole 5 years. I acted in some shows, including Rich Brown's first devised show, Cheat, and my final main stage show was Miracle Worker. I was in STP shows. I did Plays for Us. I TA'd playwriting classes. I worked in the theater office for a little bit, and I was on the STP board for a couple of years. I finally, as my parents might say, graduated in 2010, and from there I went straight down to Seattle like many people do. I pretty much right away got a job working in the Intimon box office, and I stayed there for about 6 months, and meanwhile I also interned at Book It Repertory Theater with the managing director. I ended up getting hired with them to work as the development associate. While I was in Seattle, I continued to act and I continued to write. I was a member of an experimental devised theater company called Blood Ensemble. I did a show at Annex. I produced some of my own work. Tried to stay involved, continued writing, and then after about 3 years I decided it was time to move on. Getting a master's was something I had always wanted, so I felt like that was about time. I applied to a couple of schools, all on the East Coast, and I got into Columbia, and I decided to go. And I would say Columbia was a pretty good choice. It got me to New York, which is somewhere I had wanted to be, but wasn't just going to move without a plan. And I got to study with some really amazing people. We're just going to get the name dropping out of the way. While at Columbia, I had the great fortune to study with a lot of really cool and influential theater makers, a lot of whom you probably know. In the playwriting department, I studied with Chuck Mee and David Henry Huang and Lynn Nottage, and Anne Bogart also teaches at Columbia, so I was lucky enough to have a class with her as well. I feel really lucky that I got to be there and learn from all those people. I graduated from Columbia in May of 2016. And then after that, unfortunately, I was unemployed for a while. So, not always sunshine and roses. But I decided to stick it out in New York. And now I work for Samuel French. Most of you probably know Samuel French. They publish and license plays. And I am a licensing representative with them. And I've been working there for about 3 months. Meanwhile, of course, continuing to create theater and to write and to submit to places, and then to have the great fortune to now have the show with you back at my alma mater. So before we start talking about Invincible Ones specifically, I'll just give you a little overview of my body of work and my artistic philosophies in general. My plays tend to be very female focused and have women and women-identified people as the story drivers. My plays are often set in what I term microcosms of chaos. It's really looking at the daily triumphs and tragedies of life and how those seemingly smaller events can turn into metaphors for larger events. I'm definitely someone who thinks a lot about the personal as political, which I think is something that shows up in Invincible Ones quite a bit. I like to play with the structure of work a lot. I think structure is also a political act, and every part of a play is part of the meaning of the play. And to sort of round it out, the biggest tenet of my work that I really try hard to do is to dispel this need that we have in American culture, particularly pop culture and all of our art, to dispel this need for likable characters. I think likability is something that doesn't actually mean anything, and that is often harped on as a marker of importance or of worth of a work. Likability is something that gets in your way. It keeps you from being vulnerable and open. All people are multifaceted, and we all have things we like about ourselves and things we don't like about ourselves, and likability is a big brick wall that gets in the way of seeing both of those things. So my major thing that I always tell people that I'm working with is that if you're playing something honestly and being vulnerable and just looking and working on the work, it doesn't matter. So, that's what I think about that. Okay, let's talk about Invincible Ones. We'll start a little with the history. I'll give you some of my inspirations and the things that are really important to me about this play. Invincible Ones was written while I was in Columbia to be my thesis play. The first pages probably appeared in early 2014, and I wrote the majority of it probably in 2015, and then it was my thesis play. I had a thesis mentor, Melissa James Gibson, so some of you might know some of her work. Her play Sick is probably the most well-known, or This. My favorite of her plays is called What Rhymes with America, but I don't think it's done very much, but I recommend it. After my thesis, I took a little time away from the play because you need a little distance and perspective. Meanwhile, I was submitting it to a bunch of things, and then I submitted and was accepted to Read Play Write, which is a reading festival with Crashbox Theater Company, and I did a new draft for that reading in October, which is the new draft that you guys have now. And then from here, this is the next step. Hooray! The real moment that this play began was very clearly on a street corner in the East Village, as the play talks about. I was waiting to cross the street, and there was a lull in my music, and some guy walked by and said something super not cool to me, and it seemed like before I could even actually react to what was happening to me in real time, this play was writing itself. And then the elements sort of came from there, the idea of living on top of each other as you do in New York in such confined spaces, of the amount of people you have to listen to and live with, about all of the issues that you can have in an apartment, no way to fix them. And then of course there's this element of roller derby in the background. Roller derby has always been super interesting to me. I think because it is a space in which women get to be really violent towards each other and towards the world, and they get to be really angry, and it's not about the fact that they are angry or violent, it's a sport that they're playing, and there's still, at the end of the day, this really great camaraderie, and I think the bonds created by that are really important, and to showcase that among some of the people in this play was really important to me. These really deep friendships that these women have, and the relationship to the brother as well, and the relationship to Madison's mom outside of all of that. That is the core of this play, and how we lean on each other when we're going through difficult times, and how we all sometimes have to simultaneously grieve while taking care of each other. Your friends often are closer to you than your family. They become your chosen family, and sometimes you treat them like shit, and sometimes they're your favorite people in the world. And then, of course, this idea of anger and violence, and the fact that we as women have to keep it in so much of the time, and that all of these women are contending with what that does to them physically and mentally and emotionally, and how they really show that to each other, and how they really take it out on each other. Don't be afraid of that anger. Let it come out. And then, of course, the other thing that's important about this play is that there is humor and there's laughter, because if you're not laughing, you're probably crying. The only way that they can figure out how to deal with this monumental thing in their life, which is actually an indication of a huge systemic problem, really the violence of what it's like to be a woman in the world right now, that humor comes out. I also would say don't shy away from the humor. Those are some things that I think about, and some of the reasons why this play is really important to me. So, new play processes. The secret is, there is no secret. They all tend to work a little bit differently depending upon who your collaborators are and sort of what's happening. Because I am 3,000 miles away, this will work a little bit differently than if I were in the room with you every single day. But my tips mostly for working on new plays is to be open, to not be afraid of changes, and to realize that I also value your thoughts and your opinions, and it's not just stuff coming from me, but this is a play and a process that we're all working on. It can be kind of interesting in a new play process because the playwright is there, and you know that it's like part of them, and it's that like this play is part of my soul and whatever. But I hope that doesn't make you nervous, because I'm just excited to be collaborating with you, and I hope you're excited to be collaborating with me. Of course, I'm in charge of making all changes to the script, but if you have questions or you're struggling with particular parts, I'm happy to give insight, and I'm happy to look at that in terms of like rewrites to the script. So there's sort of two ways that it can go. There are some things I'll feel strongly about and may not want to rewrite, but definitely want to talk through and make sure that we all understand. And there's some things that I may not have caught up until this point and may need some rewrite. I work best, and I think most playwrights do, if things that you are struggling with in the script or things that really interest you do come in the form of a question. And for those of you who have taken collaboration classes or playwriting classes or anything like that, you know that's essentially the Liz Lerman styles. So you'll want to frame things and how you're experiencing them. Liz Ann and I have talked a little bit about how this process will go, but I would say if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask them. And she will know the best way to communicate those. But we do have a dramaturg and we have a stage manager, and I know that they'll be taking notes for me along the way. So technically this play is not done. And we may be making changes throughout, but we're all in this together. I am available, you know? That's the great thing about having a living playwright. I'm available to talk through stuff and to definitely listen. Like I said, it may not always result in a change, but it's always good things for me to know. And I think the biggest and most important thing about a new play process is just trust all around. I would like to say right off the bat, I trust all of you, and I am watching and interested in what this process is and what you're getting out of the play and places you get stuck. So I hope I just bring you joy and not make you nervous. And I want to close mostly by saying I am so excited to be working with all of you. And mostly, I'm just hoping I can be a really good resource for you. Not just for this play, but for anything you're going through at Western and for anything you're thinking about beyond Western. I've been through it all, and I am happy to talk through anything you want to talk through. So just keep that in mind. I may be far away, but I am there. Just know that. I'm absolutely there. You know, I think we should be done. I think I should be done. That's enough talking from me. Stay warm, friends. I can't wait to hear it all. If you are worried that this is a spider, you don't have to be worried. That is a random screw in my wall. Why am I wearing this hat in my own house? Because I am very cold. All out having a birthday pizza party or something, because we're adults, and I might as well just get the name dropping out of the way. So before we start talking about Invincible, there is a lot of video that I have edited down, so, you know, think about all the things you didn't see. Like me almost knocking over my computer.